I even said that wrong. Hi, I'm Ian from Coastal Drone. So this is going to be a 45-minute long, unscripted, unedited, kind of reaction video podcast to the latest edition of the Transport Canada Aeronautical Information Manual, specific to the RPA, or remotely piloted aircraft section. So follow along. We're going to go through it. We're going to look at some of the changes that are highlighted, and I'll kind of give you my first thoughts, and we'll look at where we can go to look for more information and kind of how we can dig into this a little bit more. All right, it's a long one. Grab some popcorn, and we'll see you in there. Thanks. Bye. All right, happy Friday. We're going to take a look at the latest edition of the Transport Canada Aeronautical Information Manual, the TC AIM. So this one's valid as of October 7th, so it just came out yesterday. And the AIM is basically the Canadian aviation regulations in plain English, or more explained in plain English. So first thing I always do when I see a new version of the AIM is I look for the blue sections. The blue sections are going to show you any changes that have happened, right? It's like the change bars on a document. So we've got one here. And so this is for micro remotely piloted aircraft. So micro drones like the Mavic Mini, the Mini 2, the Mini SE, the new Autel Nano that's coming out pretty quick here. All of these are 249 grams or less, which means that they're exempt from CARS Part 9. So lots of questions have been coming out recently about, can I use a Mavic Mini in a flight review? Well, and yes and no, you can. You can start with a Mavic Mini. It's a 249 gram drone, but you need to modify it to be over 250 grams. So now it's no longer a Mavic Mini. Now it's whatever the name you want to call it, because you have to register the drone as a Mini Plus Plus, or a Super Mini, or a Mini with some zip ties, or some sort of safe modification that brings the weight of the drone over 250 grams, and then it's registered. So they've amended and clarified this in the current version of the AIM. So let's zoom in a little bit here on it. And it says here, if an M RPA or micro RPA is modified or has accessories added that brings the weight up to or over 250 grams, in their case, such as propeller guards, it's now a small drone, or a small RPA, or SRPA as they're saying here. It shall be registered under CARS Part 9. So it's now applicable to all the drone laws that are Transport Canada. The registration is done in the drone management portal. So you have to pay the $5 to register the drone. It's a 250 gram drone. And now to operate it, you have to have a basic pilot certificate. So by selecting the option, the drone was built using either a kit off the shelf or custom built parts. So it's a U-built drone. And once registered, it may be used to conduct in the conduct of a flight review. So like I said, people are asking us, can I use a Mavic Mini in a flight review? Yes and no. No, you can't use it as it is. Yes, you can use a Mavic Mini if you turn it into custom drone that weighs 250 grams or more. The caveat is that drone is not going to have a safety assurance that allows you to fly it in an advanced environment. So you can use it for the purposes of the flight review, as your flight review is in a basic environment. But as soon as you're done, you need to either continue to only use it as a basic drone with your basic pilot certificate, or you need to demodify the drone and then deregister it so it's now a micro drone again. And then if you want to fly an advanced environment with an advanced pilot certificate, you have to have a drone that is certified to fly on the safety assurance declaration list that is a 250 gram or more. So examples of that are obviously the Mavic Air series, the Mavic Pro series, Inspires, Phantoms, anything that's over 250 grams and is on the Transport Canada safety assurance list. So as I said, once registered, it can be used in a flight review, take into account that it will not have a safety assurance declaration, as we said, to operate in controlled airspace or close to people. Same thing, you can't fly more than 100 feet away from people. If the small RPS is demodified back to its original sub 250 gram version, then the RPA shall be deregistered in the portal and is again a micro RPA. So one of the questions we often ask is, when does your certificate of registration expire on a drone? And one of the situations where it would expire is when you modify the drone. So if you take a Phantom and modify that Phantom, it's no longer a Phantom. If you take a Mini and modify that Mini, it's no longer a Mini. If you then register whatever you're doing for the flight review and then demodify it, now it's no longer whatever that drone is, and it's back to being a mini. So you have to deregister it in the portal because the drone management portal is expecting to see you have a registered drone of whatever type or whatever you want to call it is. So they've clarified it in this paragraph in blue. So the rest of this is unchanged. So let's keep scrolling and looking. All right, the next one is Class C airspace. I'd have to go back and look and see what the difference is, but it's talking about Class C airspace is considered advanced operating environment. So you have to have a drone that's got on the safety assurance declaration. You have to have an advanced pilot certificate. You have to have permission to enter Class C airspace because it's a control zone. It's controlled airspace, and it generally exists around large airports. Typically extends from surface to an altitude of 3,000 feet above ground, but exact size and shape is dependent on local airspace management needs. So it's going to be different at some airports, and not all airports are going to have the same shape of Class C. It's not just always a perfect circle. If there's an adjacent airport within like 3 miles of the first airport in a busy area, then it might be a moon shape or a half circle or something. Class C airspace is depicted on all VFR nav charts, so the VNC. And remember that online, a good way to get a hold of a Canadian VNC is you can go to flightplan.com, and then you can look under the sectionals section. VTAs or VFR terminal area charts, as well as the DAH, the Designated Airspace Handbook, which is a big text document that has all the airspace in Canada in a layout. Basically, if it's square, it'll have the 4 lat-long coordinates of the corners, or if it's a circle, it'll have the center with the radius in distance. And it's actually handy to have that because if there's overlapping airspace, like in Campbell River, there's the airspace for the airport, and then there's a hole on the east side where the harbor is that is uncontrolled airspace up to... For a case, I don't know the reference right now, but it's probably like 500 feet from the surface of the water for float planes that are taking off and landing in the water aerodrome area. So there's like this little hole. And there's another one that exists like that in Kelowna on Okanagan Lake to the west of the Kelowna control zone. There's Class G airspace underneath the shelf. Like if you were to look at it from the south, if you're camera south, there would be this hole down below where there's Class G airspace here, and then it's C up above and it's C over here. So if you're again a float plane basically cruising along at the lake at low altitude taking off or landing, you're not in the control zone. So the DAH is really good for if the map's a little confusing because maps are only top-down view, so you don't necessarily see layers underneath. You can go to the Designated Airspace Handbook and look at that. Class D airspace, I think so what they've done in here, I'd have to go back and look, is they're providing more explanation of what these environments are and what better definitions of the airspace. So Class D is considered an advanced environment as well, right? They're clarifying, yes, these are advanced. If you're in C or D, you're in an advanced. There's more in 3.43. Again, Class D is controlled airspace, generally around medium-sized airports, and extends from the surface to 3,000 feet above ground as well. Again, it's probably going to change depending on the airport. You can find it in the same place, the VNC, VTA, and the DAH. Class E airspace is also considered advanced, right? So advanced airspace, it's controlled airspace for aircraft operating under IFR. So E is meant for extended airspace where traffic are coming down from Class A, very high altitude, Class B, still high altitude above 12.5, and then they're transitioning down towards a control zone. So as they're on approach to a busy airport, they're going to be coming through Class E airspace because that's meant to separate IFR traffic from each other and keep away VFR traffic. So there's airspace it's controlled airspace for aircraft that are operating under IFR, and it can exist around an airport as a control zone or away from an airport where need exists to control IFR aircraft, like I said. Class E control zones usually extend from surface to 3,000 feet. It can also exist from 2,200 feet above ground and up and control extension surrounding control zones. So that's that inverted layer cake, right? So you've got airport down here with the control zone at the airport, and then you've got the extension, and then you've got the layer cake starts where you've got aircraft from high altitude descending down or taking off into it. So there's that that shelf over top of you. A lot of Class G areas that are in the vicinity of an airport beyond like 5 miles probably have a high altitude Class E, and they're saying like 2,200 feet and up. Well, if you're flying normally at 400 feet or below in a normal environment with your drone, shouldn't be a problem, but it's good to be aware of it, because if you have a vertical flyaway with your drone, you need to know who you're going to call to give them a heads up that your drone is climbing through 2,000 feet to 4,000 feet to 5,000 feet, which is, it's possible if you've got a stuck control or something like that. So what's it saying here? When this type of airspace is not associated with an airport, is usually at 700 feet and above, and it extends up to 12,500. So that's 700 feet above ground all the way up to 12,500. That's where Class B starts and then goes up from there. Same thing, exact size and shape and space is dependent. It's in the VNC, it's in the VTA, it's in the DAH as well. So Class F. Class F is a good one to talk about because we've had a lot of Class F stuff in the news, especially this summer. So Class F airspace can be controlled, uncontrolled, or a combination of both, depending on the classification of the airspace surrounding it. It's special use airspace, so that means it's either restricted or advisory, and there's also the danger class we talk about in our course. First off, advisory is, it's not necessarily an advanced environment. It depends on the environment that's around it and the proximity to airport and people, but it's used to usually advise you of an activity that's going on in the area that is potentially busier or above average. So training is a big one. Like if you're in a city or near a city, there's going to be flight schools in the area that have carved out a section where they want some advisory airspace where they can go and practice maneuvers such as emergencies away from the airport, but they're going to be busy. So they want you to be aware of that. Another advisory is hang gliders, aerobatics, parachutists. So there's, on your map, you'll see a CYA with a bracket H or a bracket T for aerobatics for A, and H for hang gliders, T for training, and then there's a few others in the course or in the list. The other one is restricted. So restricted, and it needs to be repeated, like I've talked about it before in some of our other videos. Restricted applies to all aircraft. And regardless of if you're flying a Mavic Mini or a Mavic Pro or a Phantom or a custom huge fixed wing drone, all weights are considered navigable aircraft as long as they're not tethered. So that drone is restricted from entering a CYR on the map or a Class F restricted airspace. So what they're saying is Class F restricted airspace is denoted as a CYR followed by the three letters such as 1, 2, 3. The letter D for danger will be used in a restricted area established over international water. So that's basically sovereignty airspace or border patrol space. Class F is restricted airspace is identified on all VNCs and VTAs as well as the DAH using Nav Canada's drone flight planning tool and the NRC site selection tool. So they're still referring to the site selection, and should be avoided by all airspace users except by those approved by the user agency. So it doesn't mention NOTAMs. Okay, so another thing, CYRs can be found over federal prisons and some military training areas, for example. Additional information can be found in the RAC 286 of the TC AIM. So that's another chapter in the AIM. To gain access to Class F restricted airspace, drone pilots or RPA pilots should contact the user agency as listed for a specific block of airspace in the DAH. So good example of this. I was doing some flight reviews for someone, and the location we're using was within a NOTAM or a notice to airmen for wildfires. So in order for us to take off, we've got Class F restricted airspace from the surface all the way up to the altitude that was specified in the NOTAM. Let's say 3,000 feet, or it might have even been 5,000 feet at the time. But that altitude basically closes the airspace to any aircraft. You have to have permission to enter it. And so the user agency of that airspace was the wildfire fighting agency that was managing the fires in BC, so BC Wildfire. So process for getting approval to fly there was contact the BC Wildfire Aviation Desk, let them know that I want to fly in this area. It's well away from any actual firefighting activity at the time. There was no visible smoke, no firefighting aircraft for probably 10 miles or more. It just happened that this NOTAM, I think it was almost 25 nautical miles in radius, so 50 nautical mile diameter. It was huge. So that, I give them a heads up on what we want to do and make sure that there's no conflicts. You're asking permission. This is not just a notice of intent. This was getting written permission from them to do it. They asked a couple questions about timing, when we're going to do it. This was a flight review, so it was very limited in terms of altitude and distance that we were going. They saw no concerns or conflicts. They asked that I give them a heads up once we were done, and that was it. We had an email chain back and forth sync. So we were able to enter that Class F restricted airspace because we communicated beforehand, and it wasn't an arduous process at all. It's just a process to follow. So in order to find out about the NOTAMs, there are a couple different ways you can do that. You can go into NavDrone has the ability to show you NOTAMs. So they'll typically be a big red circle. Or you can, there's it's a user-generated website that takes all the NOTAM reports, because the NOTAM reports tell you geographically in lat long, radius, whatever the dimensions are of the NOTAM, and then they've built a map, and it's called notammapviewer.com. So if you really quickly want to see, are there any NOTAMs over top of me? It should show you them, but you always want to double check either NavDrone or go right to the flight planning tool that Nav Canada has, the CFPF, I believe it's called. We'll get someone to throw the proper name in the subtitles if we actually edit this, or if we just let this go free form. But it's the Collaborative Flight Planning Service, CFPS, yeah. Anyway, there'll be NOTAMs, and they're issued, and they'll have an expiry date. And if they're active, they'll show as active, hopefully in all of our planning tools. But it's very important that you know that you could be in an area where nothing ever happens, and your airspace, it's Class G all the time. You can fly whenever you want, but if there's a fire in the area, there's probably a NOTAM. If there isn't already a NOTAM, you can also remember that there's an automatic NOTAM that comes out for fires. And that's in the AIM as well. It describes the dimensions, the minimum altitude, and the minimum distance from the perimeter of the fire. I'm not going to give you the exact numbers because off the top of my head, I can always get them wrong. Okay, so we talk about advisory airspace. We talked a lot about this already. Let's go down some more. And remember, we're looking at blue stuff that has changed. There's a lot of really good information in here, so don't just skim. Make sure you've read the RPA section. It's only 30 pages, so it's actually a good read. Let's go down here some more. Let's find the next blue section. Scroll in. There we go. Identifying classes of airspace. What have they said here? To identify the classes of airspace present at the field site, it is recommended that you use resources such as Nav Canada's drone flight planning tool. So they're talking about NavDrone, because NavDrone wasn't out on our last issue of this. The drone site selection tool, the CFS, the aeronautical charts of the area of operation, and the DAH, the Designated Airspace Handbook. Airspace will be classified according to the Canadian Airspace Classification, arranged from A to G. A basic description of the class of airspace can be found in section 323.3 of this chapter. So we already talked about that. That's back there. And that's why that's probably blue, is it's cross-referencing, so they've elaborated more on the class of airspace. Additional information can be found in the DAH and in subpart RAC 2.8 of the AIM. So remember, there's multiple chapters of the AIM. We're in RPA chapter right now. Okay, the rest is unchanged there. Let's go down some more. I'm not going to make this video crazy long. We're already at 20 minutes because I babble. So this will be like a video podcast kind of thing. All right. The RPA pilot shall keep a record of the incident or accident analyses for a period of 12 months after the day on which the record is created and make it available to the minister on request. This is referenced from CAR 901.49, subsection 2. So if you have an incident or accident, you need to keep a record of it. You can do it electronically, but it has to be in something that is safe and secure and will not be lost. So a secure cloud platform would be good. PDF format would be good. Or you can always just have a spreadsheet that you set up on paper and print it off and make sure you have an incident record of it. If any incident or accident occurs while the RPA is being operated under an SFOC, it shall be reported to TC using the Aviation Occurrence Reporting Form. So if you have an SFOC for a special operation, then it must be reported. And you will get a copy of that Aviation Occurrence Reporting Form when you're issued an SFOC. So an SFOC is a Special Flight Operations Certificate. They're used for if you're flying over 400 feet above ground with your drone, if your drone weighs more than 25 kilograms, if you need to fly your drone at an advertised event, if you need to fly your drone over people. So there's special situations for that. And the over people one goes hand in hand with the drone being certified to fly over people as well. So it's not just get the SFOC, the drone's going to have that safety assurance declaration for it as well. They've added a bit more to the tethered drone section as well, it looks like. So an RPA is normally defined as a navigable aircraft. I'm just reading the white section here to give some context. Other than a balloon, rocket, or kite that is operated by a pilot who is not on board. So they've added here. Therefore, when a drone that is not designed to be navigable is tethered to the ground in a way that prevents it from being steered, maneuvered, or piloted, it no longer meets the definition of an RPA, and the regulatory requirements contained in Part 9 of the CARs no longer apply. So effectively, it is no longer a drone. Instead, operators of tethered objects must meet the obstruction requirement of CARs Standard 621, Chapter 11, and I'm betting that is lighting and tower kind of document. So we can go back and look at that. Let's look at that in a minute here. I'm going to bring that one up. This interpretation recognizes that drones that are prevented from being navigated along a path pose a different set of hazards from drones that are free flying. So there is another gotcha here. It's not really a gotcha, but if the RPA is being maneuvered or the navigation is controlled while on the tether, it is navigable and once again meets the definition of an RPA, and Part 9 of the CARs will apply. So first impression on that one would be if you tie a rock to the bottom of your Mavic Pro 2 and leave the rock on the ground and it's heavier than the drone, and the drone can still fly around in a 100-foot circle, it's still a drone. It's just a drone with a string and a rock. It's now a modified drone. It's not a tethered drone. So I've heard of people being cheeky about tethering a drone and saying, well, it's no longer a drone, so I don't need to comply with CARs Part 9. Best practices dictate that tethered RPA operations should not be conducted closer to people than the length of the tether, restraining the RPA plus at least 5 meters. So, for example, if the length of the tether is 120 meters, a safety margin of more than 125 meters from people extending laterally from the point of the tether is attached to the ground should be maintained. Okay, so 120 meters is also 400 feet, right? That's the standard altitude limit for drones. So if you have a drone take off from the ground and it can tether straight up to 400 feet, well, it can go geometry, math this way. It can go, let's say, at least 80 meters this way and 80 meters this way. It could go 120 meters straight across the ground attached to the tether. So they want a safety margin of at least 5 meters longer than whatever the length of the tether is. Moreover, to mitigate significant risk of injuries or damages, sufficient space is to be allocated to allow for post-crash RPA flying debris Spinning rotor components that can be flung at a great distance. For example, this is to be taken into account at the planning stage and confirmed during the site survey. Okay. So we were talking about, let's look at CARS 621, Chapter 11. Obstruction, marking, and lighting. CARS 621, marking and lighting of tethered objects. Less than 150 meters is probably realistic. They need to be lit or lighted in accordance with Chapter 11. They need to have markers during daytime to the mooring lines, so the tether itself has to be visible and marked. Not more than 50-meter intervals along the mooring lines or tether cable beginning at 45 meters from the point of attachment on the ground. So 45 meters and up must have markings on the line. Rectangular in shape, and so it's got to be orange or triangular. There's more details there. It's got to be lit. And if it's more than 150 meters, dual white high-intensity lights, red medium-intensity lights, for skeletal objects. So basically, you're becoming a tower at that point, is my impression of that. You can tell me if I'm wrong in the comments below, of course. Let's go back. Let's go back. Can we do this? Let's see, is there another tab here that, yeah, that's what happened. Made a new tab. Okay. So let's scroll back down. Let's see what else there is. Manufacturer's declaration. So for advanced operations, right, we have to have a manufacturer's or a safety assurance declaration that allows the drone to fly. So they've added a new advisory circular. It's 922-001, and it's about RPAS safety assurance. It provides a means, but not the only means of compliance to the technical requirements of standard 922. It's a good place for manufacturers to start their due diligence with respect to compliance, and there's a link to it. So we'll probably do another video and we'll take a look at that and see what it takes and the process it takes to make a drone become certified to meet the safety assurance declarations to fly in controlled airspace closer than 100 feet people. And that it's good to remind people, though, that manufacturers, so again, if you modify a Mavic Mini, you are the manufacturer of that new drone that happened to also be a Mavic Mini before. Manufacturers failing to maintain or demonstrate adherence to these requirements may be subject to individual penalties of $3,000 and or corporate penalties of $15,000. And that's probably going to be per instance that they find a problem. So this is hypothetical and my understanding of it. Again, comment below and tell me if I'm wrong. But if you do if you're in contravention of a CARS and you fly once and then you fly twice and then you fly 3 times and fly 4 times, it's not $3,000 because of all those 4 times that you flew legally. It's $3,000 for each occurrence. So that could be $12,000 in fines. So not good. An RPA flight authorization can be complete. Okay, so another reference to nav drone now. This is in operating in controlled airspace. So before it talked about using the site selection tool, they've now added more references to nav drone. Nav drone is, at the time of me filming, the only app that I understand that has the ability to do automatic approval through the web platform. Okay, some more stuff about airports or heliports. So and this is good because heliports is there's a communication process there. So advanced RPA pilots are required by CAR 90173 to conduct their operations in accordance with the established procedure. The official TC established procedure is stated below and should be followed when the pilot is operating an RPA in an advanced environment or at the vicinity of an uncontrolled airport, heliport, or water airport. Okay, I'm going to pause here. I got a phone call coming in, and we will come back to it. Okay, we're back. So we're at section 345. We were talking about operations. Okay, yeah. So operations at the vicinity of an airport or heliport. This was a good one Because we start talking about the communication procedure. So advanced pilots are required by 901.7.3 to conduct their operations in accordance with the established procedure. The procedure is stated below and should be followed when the pilot is operating in an advanced environment at or in the vicinity of an uncontrolled airport, heliport, or water airport. So this is aerodromes that don't have a control zone. They don't have a tower. Please also refer to the drone site selection tool or Nav Canada drone flight planning tool. So pilots must make every reasonable attempt to contact the airport, heliport, or water airport operator to fly within the zones indicated by orange shaded shapes on the drone site selection or Nav drones flight planning tool. If unable to establish communications with air traffic through the airport operator, the advanced pilot should establish communications with and avoid other aircraft using standard radio and visual procedures. So this is where a good situation would be to have your restricted operator certificate and have the ability to have a transceiver. That's pretty much one of the main situations where it's advantageous to have a radio when you're dealing with normal advanced drone pilot operations. If you can't get a hold of the tower and have the tower manage traffic and give everyone a heads up for you. And really the reasonable attempt is you call the airport operator and say, look, I plan to fly here at this time. It's uncontrolled, right? So it's an uncontrolled area, but the airport operator is going to appreciate and give you the airport contact management so that you can then they will relay information to traffic and you and say, hey, heads up, there's a drone south of the airport at 200 feet. If you're flying in, try and stay to the north or just be on the lookout for a drone in the area. If you can't get a hold of the airport operator and they can't relay that information for you, then it is on you as the pilot to communicate with the aircraft in the area using a radio, which means you have to have a restricted operator certificate, aeronautical, and you have to have a handheld radio. So, and it has to be on the VHF airband. So we have a course for getting your restricted operator certificate. It's $50, and there is it's the study guide, the test for it, and then it's a Zoom call test. So you can do it live over the internet with one of our flight reviewers to get your restricted operator certificate. And the test is included in the $50 price of the course. So there's more blue. It's still in the vicinity of airports or heliports or aerodromes. Pilots should note that they're not obligated to follow this procedure if their operational area is located outside of the orange shared areas depicted on the tools listed. The procedure is only applicable if the pilots are within uncontrolled airspace, right? So controlled airspace, you got to use nav drone. Uncontrolled airspace, you need to use the procedures that are mentioned above, like communication. The orange areas on the drone site selection tool are finding represent the areas with the highest air traffic due to approach, landing, and takeoff patterns at the airport, heliport, water airport in question, and are therefore protected, right? They're trying to separate you from traffic in the area. Even if no established procedure is in place for the area outside of the orange areas on the maps, pilots are required to apply due diligence, right? Be smart about where you're flying. If you're near a place where float planes take off and land a lot and it's not necessarily on the map, watch the area, get an idea of what the airplanes are doing. Like, are they typically coming from the west because the wind's always from the east, right? And they're going to take off and land into wind. So where do they fly their downwind leg, right? Where are they going to be coming for the approach to turn base and then to final to line up for the water runway that they're landing on? If a pilot chooses to fly in these areas and sees other aircraft being operated, it's recommended that the pilot land the drone and reassess the situation, right? It's always easier to make a decision while you're not also dealing with flying your drone, right? It's easy to land your drone, put it on pause, and just take an assessment. Take a beat and think about, okay, I can hear airplanes in the area. I can't really see them. I don't think they're in my area, but I can hear them, and they're not going away. So where are they going? Where are they coming from? Are they going to be a hazard, right? Land the drone, wait a minute. Whatever you're taking a picture of can probably wait, right? Human safety is far more valuable than the photo that you're trying to get at that time. If regular aircraft activities are observed in the areas, it's recommended that the pilot contact the airport, heliport, water airport operator to have a better understanding of the local traffic patterns and coordinate their operations, right? So if you're in a busy area, contact someone that probably has some sort of operational control of the area or responsibility and can coordinate with you and help make it easier for everyone, right? It's all about safety. It's all about staying away from aircraft. Okay, there's more about modification. Ooh, lots about modification. Modification to an RPAS that has a safety assurance declaration, including the addition of add-on equipment. So we're talking about like a Mavic 2 Pro that has the safety assurance declaration to fly in advanced airspace should be made in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations, CARS 901.70. So the integration of third-party add-on equipment, such changes to an RPAS structure or electrical systems, hardware and software, or any other changes that are not within the specifications of the manufacturer, may constitute a modification to an RPAS. Modifications that do not impact the original RPAS safety assurance declaration and thus do not alter the declared capabilities do not require notification to the minister, right? You don't need to re-register it. So let's reread that again. Modifications that do not impact the original RPAS safety assurance declaration and thus do not alter the declared capabilities of the RPAS do not require notification to the minister. You do not need to re-register it. An RPAS must still be operated within the operating limits as defined by the manufacturer who made the safety assurance declaration. Modifications that can affect the declared capabilities of the RPAS, add advanced operating capabilities, or have an adverse effect on safety or airworthiness of the original RPAS require a new safety assurance declaration to the minister as modified by the party making the so you have to define, you have to do your own safety assurance declaration. This drone is no longer approved to fly in advanced environment. It is the responsibility of the party making the modification or adding equipment to evaluate whether is an effect on the declared capabilities of that drone or RPAS, and that the RPAS remains within the published specifications from the manufacturer. So, for example, maximum takeoff weight. If what you do to modify the drone exceeds the maximum takeoff weight of that drone, it is no longer the specifications of the drone, so it's now a modified aircraft. The evaluation of impact of the modifications may have the evaluation on the impact of the modifications should ensure that the modification or add-on equipment can be integrated safely with existing systems and doesn't introduce new failure conditions not accounted for in the original design of the manufacturer. So you need to understand what the modifications you're going to do to an aircraft, what potential impact it has on the aircraft, and that it doesn't create a potential failure point for the aircraft. If the modification can affect the declared capabilities, or if you don't possess the technical information on the original design to properly conduct an evaluation, the manufacturer's declaration is invalidated and the drone is limited to basic environments only. So, unless you make a new safety assurance declaration. A modifier that makes a declaration for a modified RPAS takes on the same regulatory responsibilities as a declared manufacturer. So you become responsible for the drone that you have now created. RPAS safety assurance serves as a guidance to the considerations that should be made for parties making a safety assurance declaration. RPAS safety assurance serves as a guidance to the considerations that should be made for parties making... I got to read this 3 times. Okay, there is a advisory circular 922.001. We talked about this one earlier. Serves as a guidance, right? This is a starting framework for modifying your drone. So you got to step through that, and we're going to do a separate video on that. This is a big topic. The addition of a parachute system may constitute a modification of its integrated ability and its integration effects. Okay. The addition of a parachute system may affect the ability of the drone to continue to meet its declared capabilities, or it serves to add additional operating capabilities. So some parachutes allow potentially, once it's modified, to allow the aircraft to operate over people. Including just the parachute on its own doesn't allow the drone to operate over people, right? You have to have the attached safety assurance declaration. This is why most drone parachute kits are quite expensive. It's because it's not just the parachute, it's also the certification process that comes with it, and then the empowerment that you get by having this parachute on the drone. So it's now a new drone. It's no longer just a Mavic 2 Pro. It's a Mavic 2 Pro with the manufacturer's name probably in front of it, with the parachute or ARS system behind it. Drone operators equipped with parachute systems are responsible for ensuring they have properly registered their drone to, I'm saying drone instead of RPA because it's quicker, sorry. They're interchangeable in my opinion. It's slang. Reflect the operating environments afforded by the parachute, and that the RPA is operated within the limitations of the new manufacturer. For example, parachute manufacturers identified that a minimum deployment altitude for their parachute to function, right? So parachute's no good under, let's say, 100 feet above ground, for example. Then you're not approved to fly over people at less than 100 feet. And that's basically what it says here. Minimum altitude, operate outside of the manufacturer's limits, are not considered to be within the capabilities, right? So it isn't approved to do that. Okay, that's a big topic that I know there's going to be lots of discussion about. If not in the comments, you're all going to call me wrong. But I want to build this one out into a much bigger video because we've had a lot of people ask about modifications. We've seen lots of modifications, and I think there's a big process to it that it's worth it. So let's talk about that more later. So flight review conduct, there's a new section here, it looks like. Okay, and it's talking about specifying what types. So again, one of our top questions we get asked is, can I use a Mavic Mini in a flight review? Remember what I said, it's yes and no. Yes, you can. If it's something else, it's over 250 grams. No, you can't if you don't modify the drone. So what is it saying here? Prior to the flight review, the candidate may be assigned by the flight reviewer of an advanced operational type of mission. This will be used during the ground portion of the flight review to validate. So there are now mock scenarios in your flight review that depict an area that if you live in a very rural area and your flight review is going to be in a very rural area, you might get asked to do a mock flight in Toronto. You might get asked to do a mock flight in Vancouver, Halifax, or Edmonton, Calgary, one of the larger city areas, like in that 5% of Canada's airspace that you need to have in advance. Because the purpose of your flight review is to verify that you can plan and safely execute a drone flight or an RPAS flight in an advanced environment anywhere in Canada. Your certificate, I almost said license, and your advanced pilot certificate is valid in all of Canada. So you need to be able to plan and fly in all of Canada because this is our opportunity to evaluate your knowledge and procedures. Talks about the drone some more. Only a small RPA, 250 grams to 25 kilograms, may be used to conduct a flight review. Standard 921.61CI states that the RPA used for the flight review must be registered under CARS 901.02, right? So it has to be over 250 grams. It has to be registered, and regardless of whether it meets a safety assurance declaration or not, for the purpose of the flight review, they are conducted typically in a basic environment. So you only need a basic approved drone. Well, and yeah, your flight review is conducted in a basic environment. Application for an SFOC, there's more guidance available. So there's Advisory Circular 903-002. That's the application guidelines for a special flight operations certificate for an RPAS drone. And there's a link to it. You need to demonstrate an operational need for the type of certificate. So you can't just say, I want to fly at 700 feet and get an SFOC. You have to demonstrate that you need to fly at 700 feet and why you need to fly at 700 feet and what kind of potential hazards there are at 700 feet and what your plan is to mitigate those hazards and also doing a risk assessment. So the next part of it is 903.001. It's the operational risk assessment, or the ORA. There's another document out there called the SORA, which is the same thing. It provides information and guidance to manufacturers and operators intending to develop or operate a drone for operations in accordance with requirements of Part 9, Subpart 3 of the CARS. Right. So the operational risk assessment is what goes hand in hand with your SFOC application. They do remind you that it takes at least 30 working days of lead time to receive an SFOC, but it could be longer depending on the complexity of the operation. I did miss here, but it did say that the minister is allowed to issue an SFOC for operations that are not covered by Part 9 regulation. And then that's the process that we just talked about. And that looks like it's it. So big Cole's Notes review of it is, or the TLDR at the end, summary, talking about modifying micro drones so that they can be approved to use for a flight review and the registration process. More definition and explanation of airspace classes and how they apply to drones. Well, there it is again. Identifying the class of airspace, the tools you can use. So they're mentioning nav drone as well now. And reporting your incident or accident. So make sure you have a record of that for 12 months. Tethered drones, when they are tethered and when they aren't tethered, and even if they are tethered, maybe they're still a drone because you can still navigate with them. And safety assurance declaration process for modifying a drone, operations in uncontrolled airspace in the vicinity of an aerodrome, and more information about that. And then the modification, which is the lengthy one that we are definitely going to have more talks about, because this is going to be a very long video, even as it is. And I want to have way more facts and understanding of that to make sure that I bring you all the details and fully have all the resources cited. So that'll probably be a more polished video. And then talking about the SFOC. And we're going to do another video on the process of going through an SFOC and kind of the start to finish for that. So thanks for this time. I know it's been a long video, and I really appreciate you sticking with it with me, because this has kind of been I wanted to review this and record it as I reviewed it so that we understand everything that's come out. And then you get an opportunity to kind of work through it with me and learn as we go. So thanks a lot. Stay tuned for more, and fly safe. Bye-bye. Hi again. Thanks for watching. I know that was long. It was 45 minutes. I really appreciate you taking the time to comment below and share your thoughts on the latest changes. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they helpful? Are they informational? Is it your first time looking at the Aeronautical Information Manual? Have you heard of it before? The RPA section is always a good read. Like, it's only 30 pages, and yeah, it's detailed, but I appreciate you sticking with it, sticking with the time I've taken to record it and hang around, scrub through. Hopefully you've found some value in the chapters, and stay tuned for more like this. We're going to try and do these hopefully on a frequent basis. I know that we started doing the weekly questions, answers stuff, and it's been a while, but I'm working on it. We're working on some more fresh content, and stay tuned. Thanks for visiting our channel, and make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, because it actually does really matter. And I know it's a cliche that everyone says, but I have to remind you. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone in Canada. Okay, bye-bye.